Hey friends, it's Tomer. 2025 is nearing an end, so it's finally time to look back at the entire year of Magic products and figure out what were the strongest commanders printed this year. I looked at all the new commanders printed this year, which, by the way, is 500 new commanders printed in 2025. Wowza. And I selected my personal top 10 strongest ones for casual commander. Now, quick disclaimers before we jump into the list. Obviously, this is not a tournament CDH ranking guide. If you are interested in the most powerful ones objectively in a CDH tournament setting, there are a bunch of tournament reports, and you could just see which ones pop up the most in like the top 8s or whatever. This list is aimed for casual commander, which if you're using like the bracket system is like brackets 1 to 4, with 4 being high powered commander, but not quite CDH or like tournament level commander. So I would imagine most of these commanders, especially like the top ones on the list, are best suited for like bracket 4 play. And since this is a casual list, it's obviously subjective. It's just my personal opinion. I wouldn't get too hung up on which commander is ranked number 1 versus ranked number 4. The rankings are a little bit fluid, and again, it's just my opinion and it's just for fun, not to be taken too seriously. I have 2 criteria when evaluating a commander card, and that is what is the power floor of the card and what is the power ceiling of the card. I don't know if anybody else uses these terminology, but I'm going to use them, so I might as well explain them. The power floor of the card is basically the baseline power you expect to get from this card, even in non-ideal situations. A base non-ideal scenario for a commander is like if your 99 isn't super optimized, you don't have like all the best in slot cards, can you still make do with like a non-optimized list? How powerful is the commander then? How much of a board state does the commander need to have? Like if your commander needs very specific cards on the board before it does crazy things, that's not going to be happening all the time. So that's going to be some strikes against its base floor. And then also how much opportunities do your opponents have to interact and stop your value train? Like if your commander, for example, requires you to be attacking or requires you to pass multiple turns with it on the battlefield untouched, or, you know, like needs a very specific board state and it just falls apart the first time you get wrathed or something like that, those are going to be strikes against it and working against its base power floor. An example of a commander with an extremely high base power floor would be Atali. Atali, all you gotta do is ramp into Atali, cast him, and then you get to cast 4 spells for free, guaranteed every single time on ETB. It's very hard for your opponents to stop it. They basically have to have a counter spell or a stifle effect, or else you're going to be getting that value. And then also for optimization shake, as long as you have a lot of ramp in your deck, you can cast Atali consistently and the deck will function absolutely fine. You don't have to have the very best ramp options in the deck. You could run whatever ramp you have access to in green and it will always function pretty okay. Now, for the power ceiling of the card is basically how powerful is this card in the most ideal scenario. That means you have the best in slot, most optimized deck in the 99. You have the specific cards that make it pop off the best, and your opponents do not have the answers for it as well. So you're just kind of allowed to do your thing. How strong is the card then? I weigh both criteria equally when I'm looking at a Magic card. So whenever I see a new commander card, I evaluate it based on its power floor. I evaluate it based on its power ceiling. I add those 2 things together, and that's my overall evaluation of the card. Again, I kind of made up these terms. I don't know if there's like more official sounding terminology there or if other people evaluate cards the same way I do, but I'm just explaining my perspective and how I get to certain evaluations. Okay, all that preamble aside, let's look at the list, starting with number 10, and we've got Iroh Grand Lotus. This is a 6-mana teamer, legendary creature, human noble ally. It's a 5/5 with firebending 2. During your turn, each non-lesson instant and sorcery card in your graveyard has flashback. The flashback cost is equal to the card's mana cost. And during your turn, each lesson card in your graveyard has flashback of just 1 generic mana. So Iroh is essentially Past in Flames in the command zone. The entire point of this style deck is to have a bunch of instants and sorceries that you either cast or mill into your graveyard, play Iroh, and then you get to cast them all over again. So you're going to be loading up with instant and sorceries that generate mana, ritual effects, which red is very good at doing. And you pair that with a lot of different ways of drawing cards, which turns out blue is really good at doing, and you kind of storm off. You cast spells to make mana, you use that mana to cast card draw spells, and then you use the cards you drew to make more mana. You keep going, and you finally find a finisher, and you win the game. That's already kind of interesting by itself, but what makes it even more interesting is that Iroh makes the lessons incredibly cheap, only 1 mana. There's not that many good lessons printed currently available in Commander. Avatar came out and brought some more good ones, but the list is pretty thin, so you can't go like super all in on lessons and have a really optimized list. But the fact that all of them turning into 1 mana makes them way better, obviously. Like Accumulate Wisdom, when you cast it for 1 mana and you can draw up to like 3 cards, that's very good for flashback. And then on top of that, if you pair Iroh with any like mana discount abilities, like Baral, Chief of Compliance, making all your instant sorceries cost 1 generic less to cast, suddenly that means all your lessons now cost 0 mana instead of 1. And you can really pop off with that. And then also all your flashback spells in general cost less too. And then you just like make the storm turn that much easier to do. I think the power ceiling of this type of card is very, very high. If you are loaded up with all the right rituals, all the right card draw spells, the mana discounts, the best lessons and everything, you optimize things very well. Obviously, having a Past in Flames in the command zone is quite strong. He is still 6 mana. You can't really optimize out of that, casting 6 mana to cast Iroh from the command zone. But, you know, having Past in Flames and an optimized Storm list in the 99 is going to be very, very powerful. So I will give the power ceiling of the deck an A. Now, for the power floor of the deck, though, I'm going to be a little bit more harsh. Iroh is, again, 6 mana, so it takes a bit of time to actually get onto the battlefield. And if you get shut down before you manage to, chain together a bunch of spells, getting him back onto the battlefield is then 8 mana. It's going to really slow you down. And also, you do need to have a proper setup with him, right? Like, if you're not loaded up on the right rituals and everything, then the amount of spells you're going to be casting each turn is going to be much less. And also, you kind of want to be doing self-milling. You want to make sure that your graveyard is filled with instant sorceries that you're flashing back. There is a lot of setup involved. Not that much, but still more than other things in our top 10. So I'm actually going to give his power floor just a B. So B for the floor, A for the ceiling. Moving up to number 9, we have Teval, the Balanced Scale. This is a 4-mana Sultai, a legendary creature spirit dragon. It's a 4/4 with flying. Whenever it attacks, mill 3 cards, and you may return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. This is Sultai Lanes basically on autopilot. Lands is one of the most powerful archetypes in casual Commander, and Sultai Lane decks are very much focused, like most land decks, honestly, focused on self-milling, putting a bunch of lands and, graveyard stuff into your graveyard, and then recurring the stuff in your graveyard, primarily the lands again. So you want to kind of like either crack lands, like fetch lands, you want to sacrifice and put them in the graveyard. You want to self-mill so you can put lands from your library directly into the graveyard, and then you run a bunch of ways of getting those lands back onto the battlefield, triggering landfall, doing a bunch of land shenanigans, and just repeating the process over and over again until you win the game. And Teval not only sets up that engine by whenever he's attacking, he's milling for you, which is what Sultai lands want to be doing. So you put lands into your graveyard, and then also recurring those lands for you too. So he's ramping you, and triggering landfall stuff. But then on top of that, he's also another payoff for doing those lane shenanigan recursion thingies. Whenever 1 or more cards are leaving your graveyard, you make a 2/2 black zombie. So basically, whenever Teval's attacking, you get to mill, you fill your graveyard, you get to ramp by recurring a land, and then you also get to make a zombie creature token just all at once. It's pretty good. The zombies are only 2/2s, so they're not like super huge and threatening on their own, but they make for really great blockers early to mid game, and then late game, once you reach a critical mass of them, you either swing with just enough of them to start killing people, or you could pump up the team various ways. You could drop, like, I don't know, a Guilt Leaf Archdruid and just steal everybody's lanes. That's kind of funny too. So there's like a bunch of ways of utilizing those zombies, even though they're kind of small at the beginning. Optimizing things, there's like Tortured Existence combos that you can have with Teval to make infant druids. I also think like Gravecrawler plus like a Phyrexian Altar plus Teval on the battlefield means that you make infinite zombies that way too. Teval is pretty consistent value. Like you can just play Teval and then recur a bunch of stuff immediately to make a bunch of zombies. And even if you don't have like haste for Teval or whatever to get his attack trigger immediately going on, he at least has evasion. So when he does attack, you don't have to worry about giving him evasion on top of things. Because of this, I think his power floor is quite high. I think it's kind of like an A. It's kind of hard to screw up this deck because even if you're not constantly churning through your graveyard and returning things, making stuff leave, just attacking with Teval with your 4/4 flyer for 4 mana every single turn is going to make you a token pretty much every single time you attack, and sets up graveyard stuff and sets up ramp and stuff. But in terms of power ceiling, I think I'm going to give him a B. Like, yes, he's an incredibly good token generator once, you start triggering his ability multiple times per turn and you really optimize your lane strategy. It does get better with optimization. And yes, he does lend himself to some infinite druid combos, but those infinite combos and stuff don't like win you the game immediately. They can make an infinite army, but then you eventually either need to attack with them, so you need to now have like a haste enabler to give them haste to attack immediately, or you need to find a way to like mass drain everybody or like win the game somehow with them. So yeah, I think power ceiling, I'm going to give him like a B. It's just not quite at the same level as some of the other top 10s over here, but the power floor would be an A. It's really hard to screw up Teval. Every time I see him, he's like generating pretty good baseline advantage. Number 8 on our list is very much similar, but a little bit different. This is Hearthull, the Worldseed, which is another Lanes Matter deck. And it's going to have a lot of overlap with Teval, but it is in Jund, and it works a little bit different in ways that I think makes it just overall a little bit stronger than Teval. So Hearthull, the Worldseed, is a 4-mana Jund legendary artifact spacecraft. It has station. When it's at 2 or more charge counters, you can pay 1, tap it, sacrifice a land, draw 2 cards. You may play an additional land this turn. And when it gets 8 or more charge counters, it has flying, vigilance, haste. It becomes a 6/7 creature permanently. And whenever you sacrifice a land, each opponent loses 2 life. So Hearthull is doing very similar things to Teval, where Teval is supporting Sultai Elaine's decks by self-milling to fill the graveyard and then recurring, reanimating lands as a ramp and also to trigger landfall stuff. Hearthull is sacrificing lands to draw cards and then replace that land with another land, and then you get additional landfall triggers that way. Now, the one thing I like about Hearthull over Teval is the fact that oftentimes it's not a creature, right? The turn you play it, it's not a creature. When you charge it up to 2 to start using its ability, it's still not a creature. And that means you can gain value from it every single turn, but it still dodges creature removal. It will still get hit by like full board wipes like Farewell or whatever. It's vulnerable to artifact removal, but the most common removal in Casual Commander is always going to be creature removal, and Hearthull just dodges all of it. The only time it actually becomes a creature is when you're ready to win the game. When you get it to 8 or more charge counters, it starts smacking people in the air for 6 damage, and I think its finisher ability is actually stronger than Teval's ability because it is immediate life loss. So if you like scape shift or something, you sacrifice, 10 plus lands in a single turn, all your opponents lose 20 or more life and they're probably dead immediately. Whereas Teval, yes, I think the Druid tokens are more useful throughout the early to mid game as like blockers, deterrents from attacks, and you can eventually win the game by attacking people to death with them. I think Hearthull's finisher is just better at actually ending the game because it's just life loss, harder to get around. You don't need haste. You don't need like any extra card to do it. Just like scape shift, just do typical Jund land things, sacrifice a bunch of lands, and your opponents are dead. And also, by the way, it hits for 6 in the air, which is very nice. So yeah, I like the fact that it is less vulnerable to removal, so it's more consistent, and that its finisher is also more consistent. So I would say its power floor is an A. Like, it's very easy to get value out of this thing. It's a precon leader, and the precon deck is far from like super optimized for Jund lands, but it is one of the strongest precons they've printed this year. I think it is the top most powerful precon this year, and the commander is a large reason why that is. And then also, I think its power ceiling, again, is an A. Like, some of the other commanders on this list are going to be much more powerful when you fully optimize them. That's 100% true. But yeah, like if you optimize this more, you put in more fetch lands, you run in many ways of like mass sacrificing and stuff. There's a lot of optimization potential for Jund lands. It's just not to the top tier as some of the other ones we're going to be discussing. All right, we move away from land decks all the way over to number 7 with everyone's favorite cat girl. It's Yshtola, Night Blessed. This is a 4-mana Esper, legendary creature cat warlock. It's a 2/4 vigilance. At the beginning of each end step, if a player lost 4 or more life this turn, you draw a card, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, Yshtola deals 2 damage to each opponent, and you gain 2 life. So Yshtola does 3 major things for you. The first is she acts as a finisher. She's draining your opponents, so if you drain them enough, they're going to die. Number 2 is she's a really good card draw engine. Even if you're not trying too hard, you can probably draw like 1 card every single turn cycle without even trying, right? Like, just having one opponent lose 4 life is pretty easy. If you either smack them for 4 with an evasive creature, make them lose life some other way, or just obviously, draining them twice with Yshtola's ability 2 times in a single turn, you're going to get there. And then also, on your opponent's turn, if they punch you in the face for 4 more damage, you get to draw a card off that too. So yeah, 1 to 2 cards each turn, even without trying, is pretty easy with Yshtola, pretty reasonable to assume. And then on top of that, so those are 2 major things, but on top of that, she's also gaining you a bunch of life, because the drain also gains you 2 each time too. And that keeps your life total very high, which is good. You don't want to die. So yeah, she's doing 3 major things for you, and she does so in a very flexible and easy peasy way, right? Like, non-creature spells mana 3 or greater is not a very heavy restriction. It means you can play basically everything that isn't creatures, and typically most of them are going to be mana value 3 or greater, and you're going to be triggering her a bunch of times. So you're going to be draining like crazy, you're going to be drawing cards like crazy, and you don't really have to really optimize her to get a lot of value out of that. So power floor is absolutely an A. You just kind of exist. You make a deck with whatever. Just make sure there's more non-creatures than creatures in it, and you will trigger her ability a lot and draw cards passively and drain your opponents passively. I think her power ceiling is also incredibly high. Once you start optimizing the cards in the 99, you can load up on non-creature spells that either are mana neutral, like Frantic Search, for example, or just mana free, like Snuff Out. And then, you're casting all these powerful spells, but also draining your opponents in the process and also drawing extra cards. Maybe you stacks them out too, so that you guarantee your opponents are losing at least 4 life on each of their turns, and then you maximize the amount of card draw you're getting out of her. She's not going to win the game like super, super fast, but I imagine like a nice control shell with Yshtola is going to be very, very powerful, or like higher powered pods too when you optimize her in like brackets 4 or so. All right, number 6 moves on from Esper Control to Esper Reanimator with Hashaton, Scarab's Fist. Hashaton costs only 2 mana. It's a white and a black, so he's an Orzhov creature, but his triggered ability adds blue because it says whenever you discard a creature card, you may pay 2 and a blue. If you do, create a tapped token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. Now, Hashaton doesn't really do anything by himself and requires a very specific setup to do anything. Unlike Yshtola, which is like, just cast non-creature spells, bro. This one is like, you have to discard a creature card, which is a bigger hoop to jump through. And then you also have to spend 3 mana on top of that. But once you start doing that, it's scary. It's scary. Like, If you have a discard outlet like, I don't know, a Ghostly Pilfer or like a Putrid Imp or whatever, a Merfolk Looter, what have you, and then you discard, I don't know, Consecrated Sphinx, to start drawing oodles of cards off your opponents, Valgavoth to do crazy reanimation things, Avacyn, you discard your Avacyn, you pay 3 mana, and now all your things are indestructible for 3 mana instead of, I don't know, Avacyn's like 8 mana or something like that. Just scary things, right? You do need a bit of a setup for it because he does absolutely nothing by himself, and he's less flexible than a Yshtola or whatever. But once you have that discard outlet, once you have a big scary creature to discard, and you do so and you pay that 3 mana, the results are very, very spooky. And then on top of that, obviously, you're in Esper colors, you're in black, you're in the colors of reanimation and stuff. So those creatures are now in the graveyard. You have a token copy of them, but they're still in the graveyard. You match that with reanimation and stuff, and you have a field day. So because Hashaton kind of requires a very specific setup to get going, you need to have a discard outlet, you need to have a creature in your hand that is scary, you need to discard that creature, pay that 3 mana. It's a bit of hoops to jump through, to be honest. I would actually put his power floor kind of low. I would say it's like a power floor of C. But once you have an optimized list where you have the best discard outlets, you have the best scary creatures like Avacyns and Valgavoths and whatever to discard into, the deck gets really, really spooky. Like just doing this one time can threaten to win the game. So all that in mind, I think the power ceiling here is an S. It's just like an incredibly powerful reanimator deck. And when Hashaton came out at the beginning of the year, I saw a bunch of lists pop off, and it was basically like, yeah, if we don't have a removal spell for Hashaton the turn he comes out, things are going to go bad for us very, very quickly, much faster than Yshtola or whatever. So I'm going to give the power ceiling an S and the power floor a C. Maybe the power ceiling is a little bit too high. Maybe it should just be an A, but from my personal experiences, it's a very, very scary commander where if you just let it do its thing, like 1 or 2 activations, you're so far behind. Okay, so number 5 might be a controversial pick because I know this one isn't like super popular, or maybe it used to be popular, but it's less popular now. I don't really see it that often in discussions for like the best in 2025, but I think this one is still very legit. It's Ketramose. So Ketramose, a New Dawn, is a 3-mana Orzhov legendary creature god. It's a 4/4 with menace, lifelink, indestructible, and it can't attack or block unless there are 7 more cards in exile. Whenever 1 or more cards are put into exile from graveyards and or the battlefield during your turn, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So Ketramose isn't like the flashiest commander on the list. It's not going to win the game in one huge stormy turn or drop down 3-mana Avacyns, but it's a very, very consistent, reliable card draw engine for a couple different archetypes in Orzhov. It's 3 mana, so it comes down early. It's indestructible, so it sticks around, which is really, really good. It's super reliable. And it triggers super easily. It triggers off any like blinking stuff, anything that like, it gets exiled and then it comes right back. It triggers off exile-based removal. This could be permanent removal, which, white is really, really good at doing. And is also triggering off like exiling stuff from the graveyard, which again, Orzhov has access to repeat ways of doing that, like Line Sash. So that's what makes him so good. It's very easy to build around him. It's pretty flexible on how you trigger his ability. You can trigger it multiple times, therefore you're drawing multiple cards off a 3-drop every single turn cycle, which is quite nice. And it's very consistent. It comes down early and it's hard to remove. Like, that's very good to build around. So I would say the power floor is like a very solid A. Like, you play him, you have to do some exiling stuff, but like there's a lot of flexibility on how you're going to be getting those triggered abilities, and he sticks around, so that's really good. Power ceiling, I can imagine this in like high power pods being pretty powerful as like a stacks commander. You run all these ways of you're denying your opponent's resources, anything that's threatening on the battlefield, you just run exile-based removal to repeatedly get them off the battlefield. And while you're doing all these things and like denying them graveyard recursion and stuff, you're drawing a bunch of cards off Ketramose, and it's hard for your opponents to shut him down. So I think also the power ceiling is also an A. Just A's across the board over here. He's not like threatening to win the game super fast, but He's just very consistent, reliable value at low power and high power. Next up, we have Fleam, aka Green Goblin, aka Norman Osborn. So Green Goblin is a Grixis commander. It's 4 mana Grixis for the backside. Legendary creature, Goblin, Human Villain. It's a 3/3 with Flying Menace. And spells you cast from your graveyard cost 2 less to cast. And it also says each non-land card in your graveyard has Mayhem. The Mayhem cost is equal to its mana cost. You can also cast it, instead of the Green Goblin side, you can cast it for just 2 mana earlier in the game as Norman Osborn. It's just a 2 mana blue creature. It's a 1/1, can't be blocked, and when it deals combat damage to a player, it connives. And then you could flip it on later on to the Green Goblin side by just paying 4 mana, transforming as a sorcery. So what I really like about the Green Goblin is, well, first of all, this is like another incredible Storm-style commander. The idea here with Green Goblin is you pair him with like a bunch of ways of discarding your entire hand, like wheel effects or whatever, and then all those spells can now be cast until end of turn, and also all those spells cost 2 less to cast. Or you could do stuff like, you cast an Underworld Breach or something like that, and you can cast all the spells in your graveyard, and then Green Goblin makes them all cost 2 less to cast. So he's a huge mana advantage and possible card advantage if you're like discarding the cards beforehand. This commander sees CDH play. I don't know if it's like the strongest CDH commander out there. I doubt it is, but it is CDH worthy. It's basically Underworld Breach style plays on a stick. Very, very, very strong. So obviously the power ceiling of this card is S tier. Like, just if you manage to have a bunch of powerful things in the graveyard and Green Goblin's making them cost all 2 less, you're probably going to win the game. You're going to storm off. You're going to have a great time. The cool thing about this, though, is that the front side, Norman Osborn, is actually quite a decent baseline, because the Green Goblin side, if you're not doing anything with him, like wheeling your hand or whatever, he's not doing anything, right? He's not offering you that much value by himself. The base power of Green Goblin is actually quite low, but he does have a front side, Norman Osborn, and the base power of that is pretty respectable. It's a 2 mana, 1/1, can't be blocked. Every single time it's attacking, it's looting, right? So it's a 2 mana looter that hits people, can't be blocked, perfect evasion, and you can always play it out on turn 2. Very, very easy, very consistent. And then when you're ready to start popping off and having a great time, you can always transform him into the Green Goblin later. So that flexibility is really, really nice. If it just was Green Goblin and no Norman Osborn, I'd give like the power floor like a C. It's not very interesting. But because he has the Green Goblin side, I'll give the power floor a B and the ceiling an S. All right, we have just the top 3 remaining. So now it's ad time. If you are interested in buying any of these sweet commanders featured in this video, you can do so over at our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish. And the one other thing I wanted to do before we looked at the top 3 is do honorable mentions for my favorite budget commanders of the year. So if you're working on a tight budget restriction, and I was doing so for an upcoming video, it's 40 decks under $40. It's coming out either end of December or beginning of January, depending on how much time I have, basically. If you're working with a budget like constraint like that one, what are the best commanders to pick outside of this top 10? And I have a couple for you. So the first one, Kraven the Hunter. It's Golgari, basically kill your opponent's stuff deck and turn that into card draw and pumping up Kraven. It's incredibly powerful. Your opponents will hate you because you're just removal.deck, but it is very, very effective. On a similar note, Servandum does similar things. I went for a blink style version of Servandum, but you can also go sacrifice. But then Servandum turns all that blinking and sacrificing into just like targeted removal. Again, your opponents will hate you, but it's incredibly effective. And then the last one that fits this mold, sorry, a lot of the most powerful ones are removal.deck when you're playing heavy budget. It's the Dimir Azula. Dimir Azula is basically ETB, Blinky, removing your opponent's stuff and stuff in the graveyard, and basically 2-for-1ing them. Is it 2 for 1ing them? Yeah. You play Azula. No, it's like 3 for 1ing them. You play Azula, you exile one of their creatures, you exile one of the cards in the graveyard, and then you get to play those cards too. Ugh, it's so powerful. And you just keep blinking her and doing it over and over again until your opponents concede. Very, very strong. Okay, so those are the obnoxious, salty ones. But the other ones, if you don't want to be a removal deck, Tanuk. We talked about 2 lanes commanders in the top 10, and this one I don't think is as strong as those, but if you're on a budget and you just want to play like a 2-color deck, Tanuk offers card advantage, but also offers a finisher in the command zone, and it's just very, very powerful. Lady Octopus. Lady Octopus surprised me. It's basically like draw, go, artifact. You just want to keep triggering her ability every single turn, and then you can tap her to cheat out big artifacts. Super, super fun. The white-red Sephiroth. White-red Boros Sephiroth that came in the precon. He turns all your creatures into 7/5s that are modified or whatever by putting counters on them. Super, super fun commander. Does a lot of like power scaling matters shenanigans with certain creatures. That's just like a ton of fun. And you can utilize board wipes to deal 4 or less damage to each creature, and then all your creatures will survive because they all have 5 power. Really, really powerful commander. I think it's my favorite of the budget brews out of all of them. And then there's Garnet for sagas. Selesnya Saga it's just very simple, but very, very effective. And then Black Cat is the last one I want to shout out. It's basically like Gaunty, but 2025 Gaunty. You pay 1 more mana, but you steal an extra card and you dig further into your opponent. So it's like a mono black theft blink style deck. It's super, super fun. Anyway, those are the budget ones that I want to shout out. Now let's look at the top 3, starting with Firelord Azula. Is a 4-mana Grixis legendary creature human noble. It's a 4/4 of firebending 2. Whenever you cast a spell while Azula is attacking, you copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So Firelord Azula is yet another Grixis Storm commander. We can't have enough of those, apparently. But she does it in a fairly unique way where she can only be doing her stormy stuff when she's attacking. So that means you're kind of restricted to instants and flash spells. And you need her to be attacking too. She doesn't have haste, so you need to attack with her first. And when you do, you are rewarded with so much value. Every single spell you're casting while she's attacking is copied. You get basically an extra free spell that you cast for free, which is obscene amounts of card advantage and mana advantage. And on top of that, she even adds Firebending 2, so you can spend that 2 mana to cast those spells. So that's even more mana advantage on top of things. And things spiral out of control super, super fast. You chain together a bunch of spells that put you up in mana and up in card draw. You storm off and you win the game. Usually, that's how it goes. Things you want to be casting with Firelord Azula are just stuff that will put you up in cards or mana or both. Like Frantic Search, for example, is going to put you up in mana, because if you pay Frantic Search and you copy with Firelord Azula, you get to loot 4 times and you untap 6 lands for the cost of a 3-mana spell. Unexpected Windfall, Big Score, these type of cards, when you cast them with Azula and you copy them for free, they basically read, pay 4 mana, discard 1 card, draw 4 cards, and make 4 treasures and keep going. And then like the last Agnikai, you punch somebody in the face, you make a whole bunch of mana. You win the game by either like just dealing Azula damage. You could just like bulk up or whatever, double her power and then double it again. Or you could just, kill all your opponent's creatures with like Sheoldred's Edict, make them lose 2 of their creatures instead of just 1. A lot of crazy things. If you attack with Azula a single time, your opponents are either super far behind or they're just super dead. In terms of power ceiling, it's absolutely an S. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I've seen Azula in action many times at this point, and each time it's disgusting if she's allowed to attack. Now, her main weakness, and the reason why I'm going to give her power floor a B, which maybe it's an A, but I'm going to just say a B out of just like my experience with her, is that she really, really needs haste in order for her to work properly. She's a very ultra glass cannon style of commander. At least most people build her that way instead of like going more control-y, which is actually my personal preference with her. And if you don't have haste, that's like a big pain point for her. And it's an extra thing you need to add to her, which does cause consistency issues. Obviously, you're in red. It's not hard to find haste, but it's an extra thing you need to be doing on top of having a hand stacked with the correct instant/flash spells in order to actually pop off when you do swing with her. So there are extra hoops to jump through. I feel like she has a little bit of consistency issues that some of the other highest ranking ones don't have. That's why I'm going to give her a floor a B, but you can argue me up to an A. But the ceiling is definitely an S. All right, that is Azula. We go to number 2, though. For the third Grixis commander in a row, it is none other than Kefka. Kefka Court Mage is a 5-mana Grixis, a legendary creature human wizard. It's a 4/5 that says whenever it enters or attacks, each player discards a card, then you draw a card for each card type among cards discarded this way. And that's basically the card. The rest of the text over here is actually flavor text. For some reason, it's not italicized. Something about paying 8 mana to make each person sacrifice a permanent and transforming it into like some 5/7, yada, yada, yada. That part is irrelevant to the power level of this card. That is how ridiculous the first part of Kefka is. Kefka's enter the battlefield / attack trigger is essentially a siphon mine. After seeing it trigger a whole bunch of times, on average, it's going to make all your opponents discard 1 card, and then you draw 3 cards. Sometimes you draw like 2 cards, sometimes you draw 4 cards, but on average, it's just like straight up siphon mine. And that's really good. That puts you up like 2+ cards, and it puts all your opponents down 1 card each. That's like a 5-card swing on average for an enter trigger and attack trigger. That is very, very strong. Very, very strong. And there's no build around required to this. Like, yes, you can get fancy with it. You can start blinking Kefka. You can give Kefka haste. So not only does he enter, but he immediately attacks the same turn. So you get 2 triggers on the first time you cast him. You can, copy his ability, make clones of him, then immediately die, but still trigger Kefka, whatever. It doesn't matter. You don't need to do any of these things. Just play Kefka without any sort of support whatsoever, and going up 2 cards and all your opponents down 1 card is always going to be really, really good. So the power floor of this card is an easy S. This is the highest power floor out of all the ones printed this year. Like, it's impossible to get this wrong. Just play lane / ramp into Kefka, refill your hand. Then if he lives, you attack with him and you get more value. If he dies, who cares? You got your value. You can recast him later on to get even more value. That's simple. Power floor, easy S. Power ceiling is an easy A, because like once you start giving him haste, very trivial thing to do. Again, you're in red. You double the amount of value you get from him the turn you cast him. When you start blinking him, when you start cloning him, reanimating him, all that stuff, you eventually just like strip away your opponent's hands. And when they have no cards in hands, then Kefka's ability starts getting really bad. And then I guess you can flip him over if you really want to, but you have so many cards in hand at this point, you probably have way better things to be casting instead of paying 8 mana to flip him, because like, really, who cares? So yeah, this card is crazy good. He doesn't like win the game outright, with when you start optimizing him or anything like that, but he's so reliable, and there's very little play around on it. Like, the only thing your opponents can really do is counter him, right? Like, that's it. Otherwise, you're going to get the value no matter what. And optimizing him is just not really required. So yeah, very, very strong commander, easily top 2. All right, we finally get to the number 1 slot, and to the surprise of nobody, obviously, it's Vivi. It's Vivi Ornitier. I don't know how to say his last name. Anyway, it's a 3-mana legendary creature wizard. It's a 0/3. It has a 0 activated ability. Add X mana in any combination of blue and or red, where X is Vivi's power. Activate only during your turn and only once each turn. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put +1/+1 counter on Vivi, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So Vivi requires very little from you to start getting a lot of value. You just have to cast non-creature spells. Doesn't care about them being instants, sorceries. They don't have a mana value restriction. None of that. You just cast them and Vivi will ping and Vivi will grow. And as Vivi grows, he starts generating you a ton of mana to cast even more spells, and he grows more and he pings more. And then the next turn, if he lives another turn, if you need him to live another turn, he will generate even more mana, and eventually he will ping your opponents to death or just punch them in the face for lethal damage, or channel all that mana into a big X spell and you win that way. It doesn't matter. Vivi generates so much mana, so much power, so much value so quickly. Now, Vivi's power floor, I would say, is an easy A. It's not impossible to stop his value if you're an opponent. If you have spot removal, the turn he enters, you can stop him from really popping off too hard. And also, he doesn't do anything by himself as well. You actually do need to cast non-creature spells. Not a very large hoop to jump through, but it is something. So I would say it's an A. It's not like Kefka levels where you just cast Kefka and you generate tons of value and your opponents can't just like spot remove it or whatever. Vivi can be shut down and he can fizzle. However, it's very easy for him to pop off and very consistent for him to pop off. And then in terms of power ceiling, obviously it's like S plus even. If you have like a curiosity effect on him every single time he's pinging, he's also going to be drawing you oodles of cards. He has combo potential with like Quicksilver Elemental, but all that sort of stuff is like secondary. It's like a cherry on top, really. Just like casting a bunch of non-creature spells or just like putting one pump ability on him to increase his power and then casting a giant X spell that draws you a bajillion cards or something like that is going to be enough for you to ride that value train into victory. The sky is the limit for Vivi. He is very, very strong. And that, my friends, is my top 10 most powerful commanders in Casual Commander. Again, it's not quite a CDH list, though a lot of these top commanders are ones that have CDH potential, I suppose. But you can see from my criteria, it's not specifically focusing just on like CDH qualities. I'm seeing how they would function in less optimized settings as well. Is there any commander that you think should have been on this list? Let me know in the comments section below. There were 500 commanders. I'm sure I might have glossed over a couple of them in my evaluations. But yeah, this was a fun, silly one. And soon enough, I will be doing the best precons of the year as well, too. So keep an eye out for that. And the budget video that I alluded to earlier, 40 decks under $40, sometime this month, worst case, January. We'll find out together. That's all I got for now. And until next time, friends, see ya.